You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
Rewind 93.9 WYEC. I'm Sean Patrick, and Friday means mid-morning at the movies with me and Quad City Times film critic Linda Cook. And Linda, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure, especially today.
We've got some good movies to talk about, but before we get to that, I want to throw you a curveball. It is Friday the 13th. It's hard to talk about movies and not mention Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th. What's your memory of the first time you saw Jason?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I was so much younger then. I've seen them all, just so you know. This was when I do remember one of them because it was in 3D, and I don't remember which one it was. And I was so scared that I almost couldn't go into the dark house afterward. Now this is laughable to me now, but at the time, just being in this dark theater and seeing this kind of thing, along with 3D, which was very rare back then, really affected me. And I was scared, and I remember I had to go to the grocery store, so I thought, I think I'll hang around this well-lit grocery store for a little while before I went home. And now I'm sure I'd just be sitting there going, is this movie ever going to end? But it's, your age really affects you when you see movies. I mean, you develop discretion and a critical thinking, critical eye. So I really hadn't seen all that many R-rated movies before. So, it was a big deal. And now I can't remember which one it was.
Well, it was the third one, because that's why they used the 3D, because the three...
Okay.
Yeah.
Movie, 3. See, you remember.
Yeah. Let's talk about the new movies this weekend. And specifically, there's one new movie that's worth talking about because it is arguably the best thing we've seen all year, and that is Sing Street.
This movie is buoyant with joy. The joy of music and of life itself. Anybody who even likes music should see this. But people who have music at their core, and I'm one of them, must see this film by the same guy who created the also incredible Once and Begin Again.
It is a wonderful film. John Carney is the director. I don't even know the names of the stars, but there's just a group of young kids who actually have a hit song now called Drive It Like You Stole It. That song is now a single that's impacting on radio now. Because this movie is that good, and these kids performing in this movie are that good. It's about a kid in the 1980s in Ireland who he sees a girl at his new school, and he decides that the way to impress her is to tell her that he wants her to be in his music video, and that makes him form a band and actually begin writing songs. It's a wonderful story and an exceptionally well-told one as well.
And the music is unforgettable. You and I have a mutual friend who bought the soundtrack I think 10, 15 minutes later after he saw the movie. But Carney is a musician himself, and he worked with a lot of musicians, including songwriter Gary Clark. And this goes back a ways, but he wrote a quasi-hit called Mary's Prayer, one of my favorite 1980s songs. And you can hear his influence in this music. It's just marvelous. But don't go to see it for the music alone. Go to see how the music affects the characters, because that's what it's all about.
It's a wonderful love story at its heart.
Yes, it is. It's a date movie. It's a movie for people who want to learn about the 80s and for people who want to remember the 80s, too.
You're listening to Mid-Morning at the Movies on this edition of Mid-Morning in the Cities. Each Friday, we talk with Quad City Times film critic Linda Cook, and we'll continue this conversation after this. Mid-Morning in the Cities, presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
These songs never go out of style. The Quad City's greatest hits. Rewind 93.9. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
Rewind 93.9 WYEC. Mid-Morning at the Movies on this Friday. Myself and Linda Cook talking about this weekend's new movies. We've talked about Sing Street and sung its praises, and hopefully you'll go see that one. But there are a couple other new movies this weekend with a much higher profile, including Money Monster, starring George Clooney and Julia Roberts. This is a takeoff on essentially Wall Street scandals. The Mad Money with Jim Cramer is kind of the basis of the idea. And then, of course, the multitude of Wall Street scandals we've seen over time, but Linda, for me, this movie was just messy. It was sloppy, and for that, I can't get behind it and recommend it.
I can't either. It's the most mediocre of movies. It is neither bad nor good. It's just tepid. It's the tap water of movie water, I guess you could say. We were joking when we walked into the film. You said something about, and by the way, it was written by 3 people. And you can tell, because the tone is so uneven. You don't throw in a Viagra-type joke into a somber type of script that's really wanting to hit home with people about desperation and fraud. It's a mess. Now, that said, I didn't hate it, because George Clooney and Julia Roberts are such pros, and they do what they can with their roles. I mean, George Clooney is always interesting to watch, I think. But, golly, what a mess. There's a hostage situation. You know that from the trailers. And what unfolds, is no surprise to anybody, really.
No, there's nothing too surprising except for the fact that it's just so messy. It's just such a sloppy mess of a movie, and we don't associate that with the Jodie Foster brand, I don't think.
No, or George Clooney.
Second film that Jodie Foster's directed, and the Beaver was kind of a tonal mess as well.
Right, that's right, with Mel Gibson.
Because it gets very dramatic, but it's also very dramatic about a guy with a beaver puppet on his arm.
Right, but I bought that more than I did this.
I think there's moments in Money Monster where it's supposed to be that sloppy, but it overlaps with the parts where I think it intends one thing and then elicits the incorrect response.
Right. I don't know that it was supposed to be as funny as it turned out to be. I mean, there were times I was laughing, and I thought, what an odd place to put humor, and then I thought, I wonder if that's intentional.
Yeah, and I still don't know. That's my biggest problem with Money Monster.
Right. We don't know.
Linda Cook from the Quad City Times, our guest today on Mid-Morning at the Cities. It's our weekly Mid-Morning at the Movies conversation. We'll come back and wrap things up by talking about Kevin Bacon's new movie. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9, presented by Curves Davenport.
Living and loving the 80s with Tom Kent. Weeknights at 8 on the Quad City's greatest hit station. Rewind 93.9 WIEC. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WIEC.
All right, so we've welcome back to Mid-Morning in the Cities at our Mid-Morning at the Movies conversation with Quad City Times film critic Linda Cook. We've covered Sing Street, an absolute must-see. Money Monster, neither one of us is recommending that one. And Linda, I guess we're only 1 for 3 this week because neither one of us is going to recommend The Darkness.
Oh, dear. Every horror movie trope you can think of is thrown in here. I mean, there's cat. There are doors slamming. There are knocks on the wall. The kid who has the experience that the family just doesn't want to believe. It just goes on and on and on. Clear back to movies I'm sure that were made in the 1920s.
It's a movie that I think we've seen like 6,000 or 7,000 times in just the last 10 years. I mean, we've got Freaked Out Kid, we've got ghosts that think they think it's hilarious to open doors and slam doors and drop things and knock things off of walls for reasons that make absolutely no sense. I mean, just get to the point, Ghost. That's all I'm saying. Just get to the point. If you want to start murdering people, then get to it. Or if you're intending to just be a jerk, then make it a comedy instead of just doing the same ridiculous jump scares all the time.
What's Kevin Bacon doing in this?
I don't know. I guess he's on hiatus from his TV career.
What's Rhonda Mitchell doing in this?
You know, she has a taste for bad horror movies, though. Although she's done a couple of pretty good bad horror movies. Like I'm a big fan of Silent Hill, but that film,
I know,
that film was a great looking movie that had tremendous atmosphere. This one never establishes any kind of atmosphere.
No, and even though it was like 98 minutes long, I kept thinking this is never going to end.
And of course, it's just typical people. They see all these incredibly supernatural things happen to them, and then they just kind of tilt their head to the side and go, "That's weird," and they continue on with their lives as if nothing happened.
Right. I would be out of the house, which would have been burned down by the time. There's nothing to this movie. Just skip it.
Absolutely.
Just skip it. The one thing it did do, which surprised me, it portrayed bulimia very realistically. One of the characters has an eating disorder. And I couldn't get over that. And there's this moment there where this person comes alive. And the situation, that character situation comes alive. And I thought, wow, that's really well done. That's it.
I don't disagree with you, but it also seemed like a kind of a tacked-on bit of character that really had nothing to do with the rest of the movie.
Right. I agree with that.
And really, when it's something as serious as that, just tacking it on as a character trait is actually rather insulting, if you ask me.
Well, yes, that's true. All I'm saying is that it was realistic. I was looking for anything that was redeeming in this movie, and that's about the only thing I could find.
Fair enough. Linda Cook from the Quad City Times, thank you. And again, we can at least we can tell people to go see Sing Street.
We're telling everybody to go see Sing Street. What a delight.
All right, well, Linda Cook from the Quad City Times has been our guest today on Mid-Morning at the Cities. If you missed any part of this conversation, you can check out our Mid-Morning in the Movies podcast at quadcitydailynews.com. And, of course, catch all of Linda's reviews at qctimes.com. And my reviews are up at quadcitydailynews.com, which, of course, is powered by local radio. Mid-Morning in the City is presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
Living and loving the 80s with Tom Kent. Weeknights at 8 on the Quad City's greatest hit station. Rewind 93.9 WIEC.